Destruction Warlocks specialise in raining down hellfire upon their enemies, and I'm going to show you how to play them in the Season 1 of the War Within. It's going to be very beginner-friendly, and it's also going to be very veteran-friendly. So I'm just going to tell you everything, basically, but in a beginner-friendly manner. So looking at the stat priorities, starting off, I like to jump straight in with no nonsense. Intellect is, of course, your main stat. Getting a higher and higher eye level or item level of gear is always going to be the play. That is the best way to up your intellect and secondary stats. The priority of your secondary stats should be loosely followed as per this graphic here. However, I do want to say that getting a higher eye level is always going to be an increase in power and damage, and you should only be comparing secondary stats if, one, you're doing very high level content. Beginners and intermediate players, you're really not going to have an issue. Again, higher eye level is always better, but also only if you're actually comparing two items of the same eye level. Again, higher eye level is generally always going to be better. Looking at the secondary stats then, haste actually increases how quickly you can attack and how quickly you cast your spells. And then versatility, which is the same for every class, it increases damage and any healing done while also simultaneously reducing damage taken. Mastery is a more interesting one. For us Destruction Warlocks, it is chaotic energies. Your spells deal increased amount of damage, plus a random amount of up to 17% additional increased damage. Kind of random. It's an interesting mastery. I think it's honestly quite lazy for Destruction Warlocks. Some classes are a lot more interesting, but hey, that's fine. And that is unique to every spec. So that's what we have as Destruction. Critical Strike, of course, increasing the chance to do more damage. While we're here, I want to take a quick look at the set bonus for Season 1 of the War Within that you're going to be getting. Incinerate Critical Strike is increased, and Conflagrate in Critical Strike chance is also massively increased. The 4 set, when your Conflagrate spell critically strikes, your fire damage is massively increased for 6 seconds. A lot of our spells will be fire damage, and this is a really nice set bonus. It's basically adding a chance for some of our spells to crit, and when one of them does crit, all fire damage we do is then increased. Quite straightforward. If you don't know these spells, I will be going through them in complete detail in the rotation part of this video shortly. Now moving on to some of the utilities and defensives that we actually have available to us as a Warlock. This left action bar up here is things that we're more doing to our enemy, and the ones on the right are more things we're doing to enhance combat or life for us and our allies. This isn't an absolutely extensive list, but it's the ones that I think you should be most aware of and that are going to be the most useful to you. So first up on the left here, we've got Fear. Strikes fear into the enemy, disorient them for 20 seconds, and damage has a chance to cancel that effect. So they're going to run in fear when we use fear. We then have a few curses that we can use, and depending on the talents, etc. you might have different ones. Curse of Tongues forces the target to speak in demonic tongues, increasing the casting time of all their spells by 30% for a minute. We've also got Exhaustion, reducing their movement speed by 50% for 12 seconds. And the Satyr increases the time between enemies' attacks by 20% and the casting time of all spells by 30% for 2 minutes. And these are different curses we can put on our enemy to hinder their combat prowess. Going over to the right-hand side, we have things that we can do to help our allies, including creating a soul well. Now, this is a kind of multi-purpose version. When you click this soul well, you're going to gain health stones. Your allies can click this to get health stones. And I imagine it's like a healing potion, basically, they can use. You can also just create a health stone on its own. You can see here it restores 25% health. So soul well is one that you can click and your allies can get some before you go into combat, or the health stone just if you just want to make one for yourself. Dark Pact is another one that's really interesting. It's going to sacrifice 20% of your current health to shield you for 200% of that sacrificed health, plus an additional amount for 20 seconds. And you can use it if you are suffering from movement impairing effects. So if someone's tried to slow you down and then, slow you down, then beat you down, you can use Dark Pact while that is happening. So we're going to sacrifice 20% health to then actually shield ourselves for a huge amount larger than that. We also have Demonic Gateway. This is amazing. So I can put one here. I can't use it here. I'm going to jump off this building. Okay, well, I can't show you, apparently, but basically it's going to create a demonic gateway between two locations, and you can teleport. So let's say you're trying to get around enemies, you're trying to cross a bridge, whatever you're doing, wherever it may be, just getting around, you know, the kind of arena that you're in. Demonic gateways are really good for you and your allies to be able to do that. Unending Breath, probably not going to use this very much in combat, but I just thought I'd let you know about it. Allows an ally to breathe underwater and increases their swim speed. And this is a really interesting one, Soul Burn. It's going to consume a soul shard. So you can see here on my UI, there's these little purple icons. These are soul shards. And some of your spells are going to generate soul shards in your rotation, and then we can spend them. So what Soul Burn does is it consumes a soul shard, unlocking secret powers of your spells. So your demonic circle teleport, so, you know, from your demonic gateway, it increases your movement speed by 50% and makes you immune to snares and roots, speeding that up. Demonic gateway can be cast instantly, so you don't have to do a 1.8 second cast on here. Drain life. Gain an absorb shield equal to the amount of healing done for 30 seconds. The shield cannot exceed 30% of your maximum health. So we do have an ability called Drain Life. Here, draining life from your target, causing shadow damage and healing you for 500% of the damage done. Basically, you're then going to get an absorb shield if you use drain life after using Soul Burn. Health Funnel restores more health. Health Stone increases the healing of Health Stone by 30% and increases your maximum health for a short duration as well. So it basically just enhances a lot of your utility spells, and that is Soul Burn, and that is fantastic as well. Again, not an extensive list. You're not going to be using these spells all the time, but it's just really useful to know the kind of utilities and defensives that we do have available to us. Now let's actually have a look at the utilities and abilities all together with the rotation we are going to use. So first of all, we are going to be generating and spending soul shards, and that's going to be actually affecting our kind of burst window as well in PvP. So when we go in, you're going to want to use your demonic gateway, creating it between two locations where we can then teleport between. Now I would put this from your pillar to another part of the map, meaning you can get away from your enemy really, really quickly, and then post your demonic circle behind a pillar. We can then actually teleport to our demonic circle and get away as well. So we've got two utilities there that we can use to get out of dodge when the enemy is coming for us in that arena. Once you've done that, I would use your Wither spell, bestowing a vile malediction upon the target, burning the sinew and muscle of its host, dealing shadow flame damage immediately and over an additional 21 seconds. The periodic damage here can generate soul shards. We want to keep this up on our enemies at all times to help with soul shard generation. If they are stacked up, then we can use Cataclysm, but only if the enemies are stacked, calling forth a Cataclysm at the target location, dealing massive damage to all enemies within 8 yards, and afflicting them with Wither. So if they're stacked up, you can use Cataclysm to get your Wither out on multiple enemies, otherwise do it individually with just the Wither spell. Then we're going to use Shadow Burn, should I say. Blasting target for shadow damage, gaining 100% critical strike chance on targets that have 30% or less health, restores a soul shard and refunds the charge if the target does die. This is going to actually start with Impending Ruin. Every 15 soul shards spent grants Ritual of Ruin, making your next Chaos Bolt or Rain of Fire consume no soul shards and have its cast time be reduced by half. And basically, when we're using Shadowburn at the start, it's to help us generate those charges of Impending Ruin. Because the main way that we're going to be hopefully bursting on them to do our damage is with Chaos Bolt here. So if we can get really quick ones going up, that'd be fantastic. After that, we're going to use Conflagrate to help generate charges here of Backdraft. Incinerate, Soulfire, and Chaos Bolt cast times are also reduced by 30% after using Conflagrate. That's going to trigger an explosion, dealing damage and reducing the cast time of your next Incinerate or Chaos Bolt, as I've said, for 10 seconds, and generate some Soul Shard fragments as well. And then you're going to fear them. So set up your portals, wither them, either with AoE with Cataclysm or single target with Wither. Start getting your Ritual of Ruin stacks up with Shadowburn, conflagrate them, and then you can just fear them. Once we've generated some soul shards, we can really go into our burst phase. Use your Wither or just keep it up on the targets. At this point, it may already be on there. And then use Malevolence on cooldown. Dark magic erupts from you, corrupting your soul, causing enemies suffering from your Wither to take Shadow Flame damage and increase its stat count by 6. While corrupted, your haste is increased, and spending soul shards will grant additional stacks of Wither. I'm going to be going through these fully shortly as well, because these are in the hero talents. Then use your Soul Burn, then use your Conflagrate, use your Summon Infernal, and then we should be pretty high on soul shards at this point, and you can just start going in with your Chaos Bolt, and then using Conflagrate, generating more soul shards, and then using Chaos Bolt and using Incinerate as a filler. And that really is kind of the burst rotation where we can go in with a lot of damage. Apart from that, we've got a few main utilities we're going to be using. There's not a ton as a Destruction Warlock. Unending Resolve hardens your skin, reducing all damage you take by 40% and giving immunity to interrupt, silence, and pushback. We've got Dark Pact, sacrifices some of your current health to shield you for 200% of the amount, plus an additional amount. Then we've got Curse of Exhaustion, reducing the target's movement speed, Curse of Tongues, increasing the casting time of their spells, and Curse of the Satyr, increasing the time between enemies' attacks, and the casting time of all attacks by 30% as well. And those are the main curses that we can use on our enemy. So we've got our kind of opener here, and obviously Fear is going to be another utility that we do have available to us, which we're going to be using in our opening. Then we've got our burst, and then we've got our utilities. Looking at the PvP talents, I like Soul Rip. It's a 1-minute cooldown ability that we gain. Fracture the soul of up to 3 target players within 20 yards into the shadows, reducing their damage done and healing received. Also, souls are fractured up to 20 yards from the player's location. Players can retrieve their souls to remove this effect, which means they kind of have to run around and get their souls back for this to kind of wear off, which is really, really annoying for them and a bit disruptive to their gameplay, which is, of course, good in PvP. We've got Never Ward here, surrounding the caster of a shield that lasts 3 seconds, reflecting all harmful spells cast on you, especially if up against the caster and they go into their burst phase. This could be really, really good. And then Bonds of Fel is another really good one that kind of stops their movement. Encircle enemy players with Bonds of Fel. If any affected player leaves the radius, they explode, dealing fire damage split amongst all nearby enemies as well. So for this Destruction Warlock build, I'm going with the Hellcaller hero talents, and I must say I absolutely love it. So the first things first, Immolate is going to be replaced by Wither. Okay, it bestows a vile malediction upon the target, burning the sinew and muscle of the host, dealing shadow flame damage immediately and an additional amount over 18 seconds. I will also say that periodic damage generates 1 soul shard fragment and has a 50% chance to generate an additional on critical strikes. So it's replacing Immolate with a more powerful version that's going to do some other things, which I love. I actually do love Warlock hero talents. Zalen's Ferocity. Fire damage dealt by your spells and abilities is increased, and your fire spells gain more critical strike from all sources. Aura of Enfeeblement. While an unending resolve is active, enemies within 30 yards are affected by Curse of Tongues and Curse of Effectiveness, Curse of Weakness. Just getting more curses out there. Mark of Xavius, Wither damage is increased, and Blackened Soul deals 2% increased damage per stack of Wither. Oh, sorry, Blackened Soul is here. Wither, remember, is the spell that is replacing your Immolate. Blackened Soul. Spending soul shards on damaging spells will further corrupt your enemies affected by your Wither. And that is going to increase its stat count. So whenever we spend soul shards on an enemy that has Wither, the stacks of Wither are going to increase. Each time Wither gains a stack, it has a chance to collapse, consuming a stack every 1 second to deal massive amounts of Shadow Flame damage to its host until only 1 stack remains. So Mark of Xavius, that's going to basically, Blackened Soul is going to do more damage per stack of Wither. Bleak Heart Tactics, Wither damage again is increased by 20%. When Wither gains a stack from Blackened Soul, it has a chance to gain an additional stack on top of that. Seeds of their Demise. After Wither reaches 8 stacks, or when its host reaches 20% health, so in the execute phase, basically, it's going to deal, it's basically going to do the same thing. It's going to deal Shadow Flame damage to its host every second until only 1 stack remains. When Blackened Soul deals damage, you have a chance to gain 2 stacks of Flashpoint. On the right-hand side, you've got Zalen's Cruelty. Shadow damage dealt by your spells and abilities is increased, and shadow spells gain more critical strike from all sources. Passive damage there. Defensive next up. Zevram's Resilience. Dark Pact heals you a lot more. So it's going to heal you for a hot, heal over time for every second it's active, as well as the main amount that it will heal you. Mark of Perifan. Critical strike damage dealt again by Wither is increased. Again, if you've forgotten, Wither is this one again. Wither has a chance to gain a stack when it critically strikes. Stacks gained this way do not activate Blackened Soul, however. And lastly, Malevolence. It's on a 1-minute cooldown, so I would advise to use this as much as you can. Hold off a little bit if you've got like Bloodlust or something coming in, but generally, you know, it's on a short cooldown. We can use this as much as we want and should do. Dark magic erupts from you and corrupts your soul, causing enemies suffering from your Wither to take Shadow Flame damage and increase its stat count by 6. Massive burst damage then on our Wither. While corrupted, your haste is increased by a massive 8%, and spending soul shards gains additional stacks of Wither. I would literally just use this on cooldown, as long as, of course, somebody has Wither on them. And that is the Hellcaller hero talents we're using. If any of that has overwhelmed you a bit, don't worry. You know, it's all involved in the rotation that I've already shown you, so you don't need to worry about that. It's more just going through why we're taking it, etc. Now moving on to the consumables and also the enchants. So I'm starting off with the enchants here. So one thing you're going to notice is these Nerubian Gem Weavers. These are what you get in your vault every week to add sockets to your gear, and you can now add a socket to your head, wrist, and waist. You'll also see there's Magnificent Jeweler's settings. Basically, this is for adding sockets to your gear as well. In Dragonflight, you could add or have up to 3 sockets on your neck, but now in the War Within, you can have 2 on your neck, 2 on each ring as well for 6. 6 Magnificent Jeweler settings, and I really like this change. Now looking at the enchants we're having, on our cloak, it's the Chant of Winged Grace, which is avoidance and fall damage protection. Crystalline Radiance on the chest is primary stat. Armored Avoidance is avoidance. Spell Thread, this gives on the legs intellect and stamina. Scout's March gives movement speed, and then we're going to add Critical Strike on both of our rings. Stonebound Artistry, this gives you a chance for, I think it's Mastery. Oh my god, I've forgotten. Yes, it gives you Mastery. I've nearly learnt them all off by heart. You can also go for the Authority of Radiant Power, which will just give you a flat intellect buff as well. So up to you on those two. On the consumables, I would go for the Flask of Alchemical Chaos. Basically, this is actually quite an interesting one. It's going to give you a massive amount of secondary stat. I think it's like 7,000 or something, but it's going to take off 600 of your other 2 secondary stats, and this will rotate every 30 seconds. You could also just go for a Flask of Tempered Versatility for a little bit less DPS, but more kind of overall survivability. The Everything Stew is an option on the food, giving you a secondary stat, or you can just go for the Feast of Divine Day or Midnight Masquerade, pretty much giving you primary stat instead. Tempered Potion, this is going to give you secondary stats as well. Algaria Healing Potion is obviously your healing potion. Mana Oil gives you crit and haste. And then Crystallized Augment Rune, which are going to be very expensive, but it will give you a small amount of primary stat as well. Then on the sockets, we're going to be using a Culminating Blasphemite. Basically, what this does is it gives you primary stat, and then it gives you 0.15% critical strike effect per color of other gem you have. So if you've got 1 ruby, 1 sapphire, 1 emerald, and 1 onyx, you're going to get 0.6% critical effect. Whereas if you've got all rubies, you're only going to get 0.15%. So you need to use different colored gems. Once you've got one of each 4, you can use like a Masterful Ruby on or Versatile Ruby. It doesn't really matter. You could use whatever you kind of want after that, depending on what secondary stats you're needing at that point. But I would probably sim your character at that point. Once you've got more than 4, depending on the gear you get, to see exactly what stat would actually benefit you the most. But TLDR, make sure you've got at least 1 of each coloured gem on your gear so that your Culminating Blasphemite can get its full potential. Thank you so much for watching this guide. I hope it was really useful for you in The War Within Season 1, whether it was for Mythic Plus or raiding. If you do have any questions, I'll be happy to help. My Patreon is in the description below, and that is where you can find my LVUI profiles, which I'll show you in a second. And also, I'm putting together a huge macro list for every single spec that's going to be really useful for you in The War Within as well. I am doing all classes and specs for the War Within, so if you are new to the channel, then please do click this playlist here to check out what else I have, which is all of them. There will also be PvP guides on this channel as well for War Within Season 1, so make sure to look out for that. This here is the UI that I was referring to. As you can see, we've got target frames, etc., left and right, and raid frames go in the middle here, and then weak auras in the middle with an action bar down here. Chat is behind where my camera is. Minimap and details, etc., are here on the right. All of the plater profiles, the voodoo, the LVY, etc., details profile has all been made by me. And again, you can get this on my Patreon should you like it.